Hello everyone, welcome to Code with Femi. For those of you who have missed my previous videos, we're actually doing ASP.NET MVC Core Crash Course series. We've done structure and configuration, and as well as we've done middleware. So now in this actual video, we're going to be looking at dependency injection. So stay tuned. What is dependency injection? Dependency injection is actually a way of you designing your application in which your classes are loosely coupled. They are not tightly coupled to one another. And this actually helps in terms of being able to unit test your application properly, having code coverage like properly. You can actually make sure that the quality of your actual software is high, solid. And also in terms of dependency injection, it actually helps you to ensure that you can easily mock, you can easily do dependency inversion, where you can switch out, you can swap out a service that is actually giving problems. And I've already shown this example already in the solid principles I covered. So in this actual episode of the ASP.NET Core MVC Crash Course series, we're going to be looking at the dependency injection and how do you set it up, and how does it play a role. So yeah, you can actually see that we have the startup class. So startup class, actually one thing I want to mention is that there is already a built-in dependency injection mechanism in the MVC application. So you don't really need to install a third party. I know some developers out there or engineers out there are saying that there are cases where you want to do something very complex and complicated dependency injection, so you can use a third-party library such as AutoFac. But all I'm just going to say is that if you don't need it, if you don't need to do something extreme, then you don't have to use it. I've used the inbuilt dependency injection for many projects and it has served me well. I have no reason why I need to switch to another third-party library. So you just have to think about it, like, is it gonna serve you? Is it gonna do what you want it to do? Like the third-party library, like, just be sure that it's really gonna serve the purpose you're expecting it to serve, that the built-in one cannot serve. Then you can actually plug it in, but it's your choice. So in here, I'm just going to show you guys how dependency injection actually plays out. And yeah, you can see there's actually services, which is already it's iService collection, where you can actually start registering your dependencies. And what I want to touch on is the actual life, the lifetime of your actual dependency that you want to inject to classes. Before we actually go here, let's just go quickly to the home controller so I can show you an example quickly. So in the home controller, this is actually a dependency. This is actually the reason why it's a dependency is because it has been injected into this controller and this controller would utilize it. So an example is this. You see there, I'm actually utilizing it now to log information as someone comes into this actual app. You can see executing index. So I'm actually logging an information now. So that means that for home controller to log this information, it has to depend on this actual interface. And also one thing I want to mention is that make sure that whenever you're doing dependency injection, you rely on the interface and not the concrete class. Avoid injecting concrete classes into your classes, because it would be in some cases it might be difficult for you to mock that actual dependency whenever you want to do your unit test. So just be careful and bear this in mind. You just have to rely on abstraction. Always make sure you rely or you depend on interfaces. Don't avoid going the route of inject using concrete classes directly into your class, like injecting them into your class. Just bear that in mind. So let's go back to what I was explaining, which was the lifetime. So in terms of the dependency, you can actually set them as scope. You can set them as scoped. You can set them as singleton. Let's just see if I can find all the ones. That's singleton or add scoped. Okay, let's just go, let's say F12. Let's go into the actual file so we can see the different types they have. So you can say it as scoped, which means that anytime a request comes into your application, it would actually create an instance. So per request, you will get an instance of that dependency. For singleton, it's actually just going to create the instance of that dependency once, and then it would always reuse it. No matter how many times you call, the requests are coming in, it will always reuse that one. And then you have your transient. So your transient is the one that it will always create a new instance every time it will always every time it's been that dependency is needed, it will always create a new instance of it. So just bear that in mind, and always know which one will actually be useful for you in what scenario, because you have to make those decisions of like, when do I use scoped, when do I use, you have to think about the actual app you developing. Okay, just bear that in mind. So that's what I just want to touch here. But before we actually come to this place to register, let's just do this so we don't forget. Let's say to do register dependencies. Okay, so we'll register dependencies here. We'll get back to this, but let's actually now put some structure in place. So remember the actual middleware we developed from the previous video, which is this one. Actually, we said there's a sending of mail here. I think we actually have to put to do here as well, so that we can actually know what is left to do here. Yeah, so that's how you also know what you need to do. So always use to do in your application, where you're developing and you can't continue anymore. You can just put the comment there of what needs to be done. Come back to it at a later date. So, but this is actually the one that I want us to focus on in this, to actually achieve that dependency flow, because I also want to touch on some of the things, like your structure of your application in a way, just a little bit of clean architecture. So yeah, we can actually see that we have this actual UI, your UI project. But what I want to do is the first thing I will do is I will create folders, like solution folders, and call this one interface. Okay, so this is actually my interface. Then I'm going to say another folder and call this 2. I'll call this my core, and then I'll have the final one, which is my 3, which would be my infrastructure. Okay, and then we'll now create projects in there. So this is just me putting some structure in place. It's not something that you must do. If you don't see any value in it, then there's no you don't have to do it. But for me, it just makes it readable, and I can easily know what is in what folder. It just gives me this actual sense of that there's order here. So you can actually just give that your first project a name, which is gonna be your core project. Okay, seems like I've already implemented one initially. I'm just gonna go in there. And let's try to just create it all over again. So we have class library, and then we say web application. So you can give this your project name, whatever your project name is, and just follow a convention, because I actually follow a convention here. So in there you can see web application.core, and that would actually be in there. Then we have the infrastructure one. infrastructure one class library as well. Then we actually call this web application dot infrastructure. Okay, infrastructure. Create the actual class library as well. Then what we have here is we're just going to delete that class. We don't need that class. So we have infrastructure, we have your core. You can actually even call this actually let's rename that to, I think I prefer domain. That'll be your domain, that'll be your core infrastructure, like that. So we have some structure here in a place. So interface, domain, infrastructure, right? And then in here, let's delete this class, and then we can now create a folder. We create a folder in there and make this folder, we call this folder interfaces. Interfaces there. Then in here we actually like make this one, we create another folder here and call this one our services. Also we create, do that, let's just create all our folders first, and then we create wrappers. Okay, we're gonna have wrappers for cases where you want to avoid injecting a concrete class into your service. You might have a wrapper around it so that you can actually be able to test easily. So we have your interface there on your core, you have service and wrappers on infrastructure, and in here this is where we're going to put our first implementation, which is going to be email service. So this is where we're gonna put our email service, and the email service is actually what is gonna be responsible for sending the email. Okay, and then now we have the wrapper class as well, which is gonna be a class as well, and then we're gonna call this SMTP client wrapper. Remember, we want to send an email, so we have a SMTP wrapper, and then let's make this public. Then what we want to do here is we want to make sure that we can wrap the SMTP client. Okay, SMTP client, and then we say SMTP, say SMTP. Okay, let's resolve that quickly. Okay, we have resolved that, and then we can actually say constructor. We have our constructor, and then we actually say SMTP client equals new SMTP client. Okay, so you might be wondering now that we've got this now, so now what? So the actual thing is that SMTP client actually takes in some parameters. So you have your host and you have your port that you need to set up for the SMTP client for it to know, okay, what is your host, what is the port it's using, and as well as this is where you need to set up credentials, and I'll show you now. So SMTP, you will have to set up credentials as well. Okay, the new, and then we can now say new network credential. The network credential is actually a method that you can use to take in the username and password that you want to use on your SMTP. So in there we can actually have your username and password, but you can see if you go into the actual the actual class where you can see the actual information there, you can see that you need a host and you need a port, right? Let's go back to this one and actually see what you need here as well. So you need username, you need password. You can see that there are some things you really need for you to be able to do the actual SMTP, make sure the SMTP is working. So one of the things you want to do is you just want to set up like your email settings. So inside of your actual app settings, this is where you actually come up with a structure for your email settings that you want to take into your application. Okay, so in there you're just gonna say host goes to localhost for now. That's what I'm gonna be using. And then we're gonna say port. This goes to 25. And then we're gonna say username. For now, I'm gonna make it blank. And then we say password. And then we make it blank as well. You might be wondering, why am I doing this? Why can't I just put it right directly there inside of the, you know, inside of the wrapper and all of that? The thing is, you might, when you deploy this app, you might want to just change that to whatever environment you're on. So always remember that this is just for your local testing. And also you might choose to actually also like you know, put it in development if you want to, but since I'm just gonna be using app settings, I'll just use the app settings.json directly. But here you see I have our email settings, and also make sure that whatever structure you have here should be, there should be a class that you can use for it as well. So what you want to do now is inside of your core, so inside of your core, we're just gonna set up like your, like let's set up like modules, okay? And in there, inside of the modules section, we want to set up email settings. Let's add that as a model, because that we need that model public. And then for us to be able to read what is in the JSON file, we need a C# class file that will match what is in here. So bear in mind, host is one of them, and for host, that would be a string. String, and then we have int for port. Then we have string for username. Then we have password. Okay, so we have something like this, which is quite basic, right? Which is like straight to the point. And then how do we actually now connect what is in here to what is in there, right? How do we pass them onto each other? So this is where we use the startup. Inside of your startup, this is where you can now configure that to happen. So you say services.configure. In there you specify the email settings model, and then you can now say configuration dot get session. Then in there you can actually just say name of email settings. Oops, just gonna copy that into that place. You see there, the name of will just actually translate that actual email to, you know, to a string. You can see it's actually telling me to add a reference, so I'm actually adding a reference to the core project now. So this core project now will be referenced here, so that we can actually have access to this mail settings within this project. Okay, so now you can see everything is fine, looking beautiful. So let's see what's going on. What's this? Then we have that already set up. We have our email settings already in place. It's hooked in nicely. And then we actually come back here and say I option. Then in there, this is where we read the value out. Okay, email settings, and then we say email setting. Okay, just resolve it. Okay, so we've got the actual I options email settings injected into this actual SMTP wrapper, client wrapper, and then in here we can actually now start utilizing the actual email settings. So in there we can just say dot value dot host, because that's one of the things that we have to use. And then let me just copy that so we can be much quicker. Dot port, Then in here we pass in the username and password. Say password. Okay, so we have that, right? Which is beautiful. So we've set up that. The next thing that we want to do is we want to make sure that we're able to send the actual message, right? So we can have a task there and actually say send async. And then we have a mail message. Okay, mail message. And then we just resolve that. Okay, we resolve that, and then what we can now do is we can now say smtp client dot send. This looks like a synchronous method. Okay, this is awaitable, so we use that one and just say mail message. Okay, then we can await this. Okay, so we actually have something now in place, and the next thing we want to do is we want to just implement an interface in here in your core that would actually link back to the infrastructure. Okay, in here now, so we're just gonna like register an interface now. Put in an interface for that, so we call this ismtp client, and that would be the actual interface that will take over this guy. So let's copy that guy. We just say ismtp, then we go back here and make this one public, and we just paste that in, clean up our space, and also resolve that space and that type. Okay, so as you can see now, it's getting there. We're getting there. We have this smtp client now from the core. We'll put that inside of our wrapper. So we have a wrapper now, and one thing you should bear in mind is that smtp client is actually a class that you have to dispose once you're done with it. So you just have to call this actual method of it to say dispose, just to avoid memory leaks. So just make sure you call dispose once you're done sending the message. And also we just have to make sure that when we register it, we're gonna register it in a way that it will always recreate an instance per request, so we make sure it's scoped. Okay, but this is our wrapper, and then our wrapper now can actually now be used inside of our mail service. So our mail service is where we're going to use our wrapper now to say private read only. And then we can now say this one. So we're going to use this actual smtp client. Okay, tutor, and then we actually inject this now. And bear in mind, we're gonna resolve this inside of the startup class. So passing that in, smtp client. Okay, that's in there now, right? So we have all of this now, which is perfect. And what we can now do is we can just inherit from email sender. So email sender is the one that has been, it's part of the .NET framework available libraries. So you can see the ASP.NET Core in Identity UI. So we can actually just use that one. So that one would actually just tell us that we need to implement the actual interface. So that we'll do that now. Just waiting for it to actually just resolve that. Then we can actually use that to put some structure in place. Okay, so we have that, right, which is like basic structure. Then in there we can actually just implement interface. That will give us like the actual what we need to implement. And what we have to just implement here is we have to take that out. Then we can actually call that guy. But before we call that guy, let's just first say mail message, because that's what we're gonna pass in into it. Mail message. The new mail message. Let's see what this is all about. So in there, what do we have here? Okay, we have something nice here that we can just quickly use for this example. So contains the address of the sender of the message. Okay, so what we can now do is we can just make sure that we pass in the actual email where we want the email to go, but we can actually just so this is gonna be from. So if you check the signature here, it says from and then to, right? So what we can now do is we can actually just say our from is just no reply, okay, at whatever mvcapp.com. okay, it's just an example. And then we have our email, so that our email will go in there, right? And then we have mail message. Then we can now have the rest, which is your subject. It's gonna be a subject. And then we have our mail message, which is going to be your body, and just say body, which is going to be HTML message. Then we can just say mail message dot is HTML body, is body HTML. Then we can just say true. So that means that you can actually have HTML constructed there, and you can actually feed it into this method. Then the final one you want to call is smtp client dot send asynchronous, which would be your mail message. So like we have it, actually we've actually implemented the the actual structure of making sure that we are able to, I don't know what's going on here. Task. Happy. Okay, so that means that we just have to put in asynchronous here. We just make sure that always put in the async. The async and await actually goes hand in hand. So just make sure that that is actually like in place, or else you're gonna have that same problem that I just had now. So you can see now that we have a simple structure, right? Which is fine. So now how do we now tell our app that we have all of this set up? Okay, this is how we do it. So one of the first thing you have to just do is you have to just make sure that you check all the actual services you've created. So the first one I actually created was one of this, which is the SMTP wrapper. So this has to be registered in the startup as. So I'm just gonna grab the startup class, and let's actually split the screen into two so you can actually see how to actually do this properly. And then remember the to do we have here. So in there we can now say service dot add scoped, and then we can now say our interface is SMTP client, sorry, SMTP client, and then we say SMTP client wrapper. Okay, you can see that that is actually like what we want to have. Okay, then we can just add reference to infrastructure as well in our interface, which is fine because we need it. So now you can see that's the first dependency that we've registered now. Registered it two together, and then the other one we did was this one. So you just can just copy and paste that and just do same, rinse and repeat. Okay, and we can just resolve the namespace for those. So using same story for this one. Then we almost there. So you can see we've registered, so we don't really need it to do anymore. We can just take out the to do. Okay, so now the question is, how do we really use this? How do we really test this to be sure that this is actually working as expected? Okay, we have this now, and then in our middleware, this is where we can consume it, because this is where we want to like do to make sure that things are actually working, and so we will just have to put it in inside of this actual middleware. And just bear in mind, when you actually like injecting dependency inside of a middleware, it's actually different from your normal class. The only time you can actually inject into the constructor a dependency is when it's a singleton. If it's actually a singleton service, a dependency, then you can register it in here. But if it's not, do not put it in here, because it would actually fail. Your actual application would not run. It will tell you it cannot resolve that actual dependency. And I will show you an example now. So let's say if I put in here the email sender, right, which is the email sender, okay, and then let's just run it as it is so you can see what I mean. So this should not work, and the reason why it would not work is because inside of this actual startup class, I've said it's scoped. It's not a singleton service. So just always bear that in mind, or else you're just gonna be wondering what is happening when the app is not running, or what have I done? So just bear that in mind, and I will show you how to actually resolve it. So only singleton goes into, you can see here right there, you can see it's gonna like tell you it's not gonna be happy, and just make sure that you bear this in mind. So how do you resolve this now? Basically, you just have to move this out of here and actually move it into that invoke method in there, and it will resolve nicely. Okay, let's see. I think we just have to stop this, start it again. But in there we have the email sender, right? And is the email sender now, this is what we want to fix, because we have this to do just to send an exception to the admin. So let's have an await, because an awaitable, and then say send, and then in here this is where you want to put in the email of the actual admin. You say so admin@mvcapp.com, and then we have your subject, which is there is fire on the mountain. The app is crashing. It's crashing. And then you want to send the exception to the actual administrator, because the administrator is the people that are actually like they own the app. They know what's going on there, like your software engineers, you know, the owner of this actual, you know, app. So that's how you make sure that they get the message, and then you can just send a friendly message to the people out there. You just say friendly message to end users. Okay, let's take out that to do, because we have that already covered. Now we can test it now and see what happens. And also you might be wondering, okay, now we have all of this, but we don't have any, you know, how is it going to send this email since we don't have like a real SMTP? So what you can do is you can set up a fake SMTP. So there's a lot online. So there's one that is called, I think it's called Mail Slopper, and also there's one called SMTP for Dev. So those are the ones that you can actually use. You know, you can use SMTP for Dev, you can use Mail Slopper. You can just download it. For Mail Slopper, you just have to download the executable file and run it on Windows, and then you can easily get it. So I'm gonna do it now. This is what it looks like currently. I've downloaded it, and then all I need to do is just run this one for Mail Slopper, and that would actually start up the actual you see the fake server, SMTP server. You can see it's telling me it's listening to that. Then that means I can actually go to this actual link here. Okay, let's go there and see. So you can see currently now I don't have any emails currently, but now in my home controller there is actually an exception I've added, just to make sure that, you know, we throw an exception when it tries to hit this actual controller, so we can see how our middleware will handle it, and also like make sure it logs out, you know, the necessary, like sends the necessary information to the admin, and also show a friendly message to the users. So let's just see how we've been able to use dependency injection now to actually, you know, make sure that we have all of these services now talking to one another they are all still loosely coupled. Okay, so now just waiting. Okay, I was quicker than I expected. So now you can see it's actually debugging now. Let's just go. It's gonna forward the request now to the actual index page. You can see there the controller endpoint, and then in there, boom, there's fire. Okay, now it's gonna come in here. The actual middleware will catch it. You can see there, and then it's gonna try to send. Let's go into that service and see if it's gonna see that service. You can see it's getting into the service now. The SMTP client has some things in there. If you open it, you can see it's all resolved properly for this, and then we can actually go deeper to the actual section where we have the wrapper. You can see the wrapper as well. Everything is actually connected correctly. You see, and it's gonna send the message. See if it sends the message. Okay, I think it has sent the message, but let's see if there's any message anywhere. Okay, we don't have a message yet, so that means that maybe our port is still wrong, but don't worry. Then we dispose it. So we dispose, remember, then we send a simple message to them. You see something went wrong, please try again. So now let's just go see what port they want us to. Let's see what port they want us to do this with. So 2500, so that means that's what they need us to actually set our port to. I think in the app settings we set it to 25, right? Yeah, you can see there. So let's just put 2 zeros at the end there, and let's refresh this and see what happens now. So hopefully now I want to believe we should be able to get a message for the admin, so that they can be able to see how they're gonna resolve this issue when it arises. Okay, it's coming up. Okay, same story. Middleware endpoint fire, then catch the exception, then send the message. So let's see now if we have something interesting here. Yeah, we do. Can you see that? So this is actually the exception that is coming through our fake mail server, SMTP server, and you can see the actual full stack exception. Can you see there? This is what the admin is going to get. Now, oh wow, there's a problem here in the controller, in controller index. You can see there, gives them the full place, even the line where it's actually up on line 20 of the controller class. And then if you go into your controller class, where's your controller class? Line 20, you can see, boom. Can you see 20? And then continue to play. You will see right there that the actual users are going to get a friendly message. So that wraps up the dependency injection. I hope you guys enjoyed this. I hope you guys learned. The next one we're going to be dealing with is Builtin. I'll see you in my next video. Don't forget to like, don't forget to subscribe, and keep well.